The transport shuttle's engines died with a mechanical wheeze, leaving Private Elias Monroe floating in the suffocating silence of deep space. Through the porthole, Valtheri Station hung like a metallic tumor against the quarantine moon's sickly green glow, a prison masquerading as a research facility. "Welcome to the edge of nowhere, soldier." Commander Kane's voice crackled through the comm as the docking clamps engaged with a violent shudder. "Hope you're ready for the most boring assignment of your military career." Elias gathered his duffel bag, straightening his uniform. At 26, he'd seen combat on 3 different worlds, but this felt different. Isolation duty. Babysitting a single prisoner whose very existence was classified above his pay grade. The station's corridors reeked of recycled air and industrial cleanser. Kane, a weathered man with dead eyes, led him through the maze of reinforced bulkheads and security checkpoints. Prisoner designation, Subject 07. Last surviving member of the Valtheri species. Highly dangerous psychic capabilities. They stopped before a massive blast door marked with biohazard warnings. Through the reinforced window, Elias caught his first glimpse of her. She wasn't what he'd expected. The creature, woman, sat curled in the corner of a sterile white cell, her pale purple skin almost luminescent under the harsh fluorescent lights. Dark curls fell across her face as she rocked slowly, whispering words that seemed to shimmer in the air like heat waves. She had 2 arms, 2 legs, 5 fingers on each hand, so heartbreakingly human in form that Elias felt his chest tighten. "Don't let appearances fool you," Kane continued, his voice sharp. "Her homeworld had 12 billion inhabitants. Now it's a floating graveyard because her kind couldn't control their abilities. She's the last one for a reason." The rules were burned into Elias's mind within the hour: maintain distance, never speak to the subject, avoid direct eye contact. The psychic dampening field around her cell was supposedly foolproof, but Kane's paranoia ran deeper than standard protocol. "She's been here 3 years, Kane explained as they completed the tour. "No incidents, but that doesn't mean she's safe. The moment you start thinking of her as anything other than a weapon, you're compromised." That night, Elias walked his first patrol route. The station's skeleton crew of 8 guards maintained constant surveillance, but the late shift left long stretches of solitude. At 0300 hours, he found himself standing before her cell again. She was awake, pressed against the far wall, her violet eyes reflecting the emergency lighting like a trapped animal's. For a moment, their gazes met through the reinforced glass. Elias expected manipulation, some psychic assault against his mind. Instead, he saw something that made his breath catch: raw, desperate loneliness that mirrored his own. She looked away first, resuming her whispered litany in that alien tongue. But as Elias turned to continue his patrol, he heard something that made him freeze. "Please." The word was barely audible, spoken in perfect standard. "I know you can hear me." Every protocol screamed at him to keep walking. His training, his duty, his survival instincts all demanded silence. But something in that broken whisper, something achingly human, made him stop. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," he said quietly, his voice barely carrying through the cell's ventilation system. A pause. Then, so soft he almost missed it, "Thank you for stopping." 3 weeks passed before Elias found the courage to speak to her again. Each night patrol became an exercise in willpower, walking past her cell while she sat motionless in meditation or whispered her haunting prayers. The longing in her violet eyes haunted his dreams. Finally, during a late shift when the other guards were playing cards in the rec room, Elias approached her cell with a ration pack tucked inside his jacket. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly through the ventilation grate. Zyria, he'd learned her name from classified files he wasn't supposed to access, looked up with surprise. Her pale purple skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim emergency lighting, and those dark curls framed a face that was achingly beautiful despite the sadness etched in every line. "You shouldn't risk this," she said, her voice carrying a melodic accent that made his chest tighten. "Commander Kane monitors everything." The dampening field blocks his sensors during routine maintenance cycles, Elias replied, sliding the food through a small service panel. Their fingers brushed for an instant, her skin was warm, electric. 20 minutes. I checked. She accepted the food with trembling hands, as if she'd forgotten what kindness felt like. Why are you doing this? Elias sat cross-legged on the floor outside her cell, close enough to see the silver flecks in her violet eyes. Because you're not what they said you'd be. You're not a monster. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. My people, we were connected, always. Every thought, every emotion shared across our world like a great symphony. When the cascade happened, when our collective consciousness collapsed, I felt 12 billion minds scream and go silent at once. Her voice broke, and Elias felt his heart shatter for her. I'm the only one left because I was already broken. Cast out. My abilities were different. Unstable. The others tried to fix me, to bring me back into harmony, but I was too damaged. She laughed bitterly. The irony is that my defectiveness saved me. You're not defective, Elias said firmly. You're unique. Special. Your commanders think I'm dangerous. They're not wrong. When I feel strong emotions, when the walls I've built start to crack. She gestured helplessly. Things happen. Objects move. Minds touch mine whether I want them to or not. But you control it. I can see you fighting it every second. Their conversations became a nightly ritual. Elias brought books, poetry, human history, stories of Earth. Zyria shared fragments of Veltheri culture, their crystal cities that sang with psychic resonance, their art that existed as pure emotion given form, their love stories that literally bound souls together. We had a concept, she explained one night, her fingers tracing patterns on the cell floor that seemed to shimmer with residual energy. Veleneth. It means, the choosing of hearts. When two Veltheri felt deep connection, their minds would merge partially, permanently. They would share dreams, emotions, even memories. That sounds beautiful, Elias whispered, imagining what it would be like to truly know another person so completely. It was. But it also made us vulnerable. When the cascade began, every bonded pair amplified the psychic storm. Love became our destruction. The space between them seemed to crackle with unspoken longing. Elias found himself pressing closer to the reinforced glass, wishing desperately he could touch her face, hold her, offer comfort beyond words. I dream about you, Zyria admitted, her voice barely audible. Is that wrong? I dream about you too, he confessed. Every night. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, the air itself seemed to pulse with energy. The lights flickered, and Elias felt something brush against his mind, warm, gentle, achingly tender. I'm sorry, she gasped, pulling back. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, Elias said quickly. It felt right. Like coming home. They stared at each other through the barrier, both breathing hard, both understanding that they'd crossed another line, one that might be impossible to step back from. Elias, she whispered. What are we doing? Something dangerous, he replied. Something necessary. 2 months into their secret meetings, the inevitable happened. Elias arrived for his shift to find Zyria collapsed on her cell floor, convulsing as psychic energy arced around her like purple lightning. The dampening field sparked and failed under the assault. Without thinking, he overrode the cell locks and rushed inside, dropping to his knees beside her thrashing form. The moment his hands touched her skin, the chaotic energy calmed, drawn into him like a grounding wire. Elias? Her voice was weak, confused. You shouldn't be in here. If the field is down. I don't care. He gathered her into his arms, feeling the rightness of it down to his bones. Her body fit against his perfectly, all soft curves and alien warmth. Are you hurt? Nightmare, she whispered against his chest. The same one, always. My world dying, their voices screaming, and I can't save them. Her fingers clutched at his uniform. But when you touched me, it stopped. How is that possible? Elias smoothed her dark curls, marveling at their silky texture. Maybe we balance each other somehow. They stayed like that for hours, holding each other in the broken cell while the dampening field slowly rebooted around them. Somewhere in those stolen moments, comfort became something deeper, more dangerous. I need to tell you something, Zaria murmured, her lips brushing against his throat. My people, we don't just share minds when we bond. We share everything. Every sensation, every pleasure, every touch magnified between two souls. Elias's breath caught. Zaria. I've never experienced it, she continued, her voice growing husky. I was cast out before I could find my match. But with you, I feel echoes of what it might be like. When she looked up at him, her violet eyes were dark with desire and something deeper, trust, perhaps, or the beginning of love. Elias leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted like starlight and possibility. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The moment their lips met, Zaria's suppressed abilities flared to life, creating a psychic bridge between them. Elias gasped as sensation doubled. He felt his own kiss from her perspective while experiencing her reactions to his touch. Pleasure cascaded between them in an endless feedback loop. Is this what Veleneth feels like? He whispered against her mouth. Better, she breathed. Because you chose me knowing what I am. Knowing the danger. Their lovemaking was careful, reverent, two damaged souls finding healing in each other's touch. Every caress was shared, every shiver of pleasure amplified through their psychic connection. When Zaria's abilities reached their peak, the air around them shimmered with aurora-bright energy, but instead of destructive chaos, it felt like pure creation. Afterward, they lay entwined on the narrow cell bunk, her purple skin luminous against his pale human flesh. The dampening field hummed back to life around them, but the connection remained, fainter now, but unbreakable. They'll kill us if they find out, Zaria said, tracing patterns on his chest that tingled with residual psychic energy. Then we'll be careful, Elias replied, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. This is worth any risk. But even as he spoke, he heard footsteps in the corridor. Kane's voice echoing through the comm system, checking in with the night shift. They had seconds before discovery. Elias slipped out of the cell just as the commander rounded the corner, straightening his uniform and trying to look casual. Kane's suspicious gaze swept over him, noting his slightly disheveled appearance. Everything secure, Monroe? Yes, sir. Subject 07 had some kind of episode earlier, but the dampening field contained it. Kane's eyes narrowed. Episode? Why wasn't I notified? It lasted less than a minute, sir. Field readings returned to normal immediately. The commander studied the cell readouts, frowning at the gaps in the data where the field had failed. Behind the reinforced glass, Zaria sat in her usual meditation pose, giving no sign of their intimacy. Maintain extra vigilance, soldier. Something feels off tonight. As Kane's footsteps faded, Elias met Zaria's eyes through the barrier. The love he saw there made his heart race with equal parts joy and terror. They were walking a razor's edge now, and one misstep would destroy them both. Captain Voss arrived on the next supply transport, a brutal man with dead eyes and a reputation for creative interrogation techniques. Kane welcomed him with barely concealed relief. High Command wants a full evaluation of the subject's capabilities, Voss announced during the morning briefing, his voice like grinding metal. Too many years of dormancy. We need to know if she's still a threat. Elias felt ice form in his veins. Sir, the subject has been completely stable. No incidents in 3 years. Voss's smile was predatory. Exactly the problem, soldier. A weapon that doesn't fire might be broken. Time to pull the trigger. The test began at 1,400 hours. Voss had the dampening field reduced to minimal levels, then began psychological provocation. Insults about her dead species. Questions about the cascade delivered with clinical cruelty. Xyria endured it all with quiet dignity, her hands clenched so tightly her nails drew purple blood. But when Voss activated the neural probe, a device designed to stimulate pain receptors directly, she screamed. The sound tore through Elias like a blade. Every instinct screamed at him to intervene, but Kane's hand on his shoulder kept him frozen in place. Through their psychic bond, he felt echoes of her agony, the careful walls she'd built crumbling under the assault. Interesting, Voss muttered, watching his reading spike. The psychic resonance is increasing. Let's see what happens when we push harder. Sir, please, Elias found himself saying. She's contained. There's no need for. Stand down, Private. Kane's voice was granite. This is necessary. But when Voss reached for the probe's amplification controls, something snapped inside Elias. The image of Xyria's broken trust, her faith in his protection shattered, became unbearable. He moved without thinking, shoving past Kane and slamming his fist into the emergency shutdown. The probe deactivated with a sharp whine, and Xyria collapsed against the cell wall, gasping. What the hell do you think you're doing? Voss roared, spinning to face him. My job, Elias replied, stepping between the captain and the cell. Protecting a secured prisoner from unnecessary harm. Unnecessary? Voss's hand dropped to his sidearm. I decide what's necessary here, soldier. The standoff stretched like a taut wire. Behind him, Elias could hear Xyria struggling to breathe, her psychic abilities fluctuating wildly as emotion overwhelmed her control. The lights flickered. Coffee cups began to rattle on nearby tables. Everyone out, she said suddenly, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. Now. Before I lose control completely. Kane grabbed Voss's arm. Sir, if her abilities cascade, this entire station. I'm not afraid of some broken alien, Voss snarled, but his voice carried a tremor of uncertainty. That's when Xyria stood, power flowing around her like visible aurora. Her violet eyes blazed with ancient fury, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of a dying civilization. You should be afraid, she said, and every piece of electronic equipment in the room sparked. I am the last echo of 12 billion screaming voices. I am the survivor of a psychic apocalypse that cracked a planet's crust. I am everything your worst fears imagine. She stepped toward the reinforced glass, and hairline fractures appeared along its surface. Voss stumbled backward, his hand shaking as he drew his weapon. But I choose not to be, Xyria continued, her voice softening. Her gaze found Elias's, and the love there was so pure it took his breath away. Someone showed me that I could be more than the sum of my trauma. Someone chose to see the person beneath the monster. The psychic storm calmed gradually, power settling around her like a gentle cloak rather than a weapon. She sank back to the floor, exhausted but unbroken. Your test is over, Captain, she said quietly. I am dangerous. But I am not your enemy. Voss holstered his weapon with trembling hands, his face pale. This will be reported to High Command. I'm sure it will, Xyria replied. Tell them I passed. Later that night, after Voss had locked himself in his quarters and Kane had reluctantly resumed normal operations, Elias sat outside her cell in the dim emergency lighting. Thank you, Xyria whispered. For standing up for me. For believing in who I choose to be rather than what I am. Always, Elias replied. No matter what comes next. But they both knew that after today, everything had changed. The secret was out, their connection exposed. And Captain Voss would not forget the humiliation of being faced down by a supposedly broken alien and the guard who loved her. The tribunal was scheduled for 0800 hours the following morning. High Command's response to Voss's report had been swift and merciless, court-martial for Elias. Immediate transfer to a maximum security facility for Xyria. Termination of the failed containment protocol. But Elias had learned a few things during his months on the station. Kane, for all his paranoia, had grown tired of his posting. The other guards were more interested in their card games than actual security. And the station's proximity to the quarantine moon meant rescue ships were days away. Most importantly, he'd learned that love could make a person capable of impossible things. "Are you certain about this?" Zyria asked as he overrode her cell locks for the final time. "There's no going back once we cross this line." "There was no going back the moment I first spoke to you," Elias replied, gathering the supplies he'd been stockpiling for weeks. "The only question is whether we run or fight." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, Elias pulled up the station's communication logs on his portable terminal. "I've been monitoring transmissions. High Command has been lying about your people's fate. The cascade didn't destroy your homeworld, it cracked it open. And deep in the planet's core, there are still life signs. Psychic signatures." Zyria's eyes widened. "That's impossible. I felt them die. All of them." "You felt their collective consciousness collapse," Elias corrected. "But what if some survived in the deep places? What if they're waiting for someone to find them?" Hope and terror warred across her beautiful features. "Even if that's true, how could we possibly?" Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Kane's voice echoed through the corridors, "Security breach in containment level 7. All guards to stations." "They know," Elias said grimly. "Choice time, love. Do we steal a transport and run for the outer colonies, or do we steal a long-range explorer and go looking for your people?" Zyria was quiet for a long moment, her psychic abilities reaching out through the station's superstructure, touching the minds of every person aboard. When she opened her eyes, they blazed with newfound purpose. "Kane is in the armory. Voss is trying to reach the communication center. The other guards are confused, scattered." She stood, power flowing around her like liquid starlight. "And there's a Class 7 Explorer in Bay 3 with full navigation capabilities and life support for extended deep space travel." "Then we go home," Elias said simply. "We find your people. And we prove that love can survive even the end of worlds." Their escape was a symphony of controlled chaos. Zyria's abilities, no longer suppressed, turned the station's own systems against its occupants. Blast doors sealed at crucial moments. Gravity fluctuated in strategic corridors. Communication channels filled with psychic static that left their pursuers disoriented and afraid. But it was Elias's planning and tactical knowledge that got them to the docking bay alive. When Voss finally cornered them at the Explorer's airlock, weapon drawn and face twisted with rage, it was their combined strength that ended the confrontation. "You're making a mistake," Voss snarled. "She's a weapon. A living catastrophe. The moment you're out of her dampening field, she'll consume your mind and leave you a hollow shell." "He's wrong," Zyria said softly, taking Elias's hand. "Show him." The psychic bond between them flared to life, visible now as shimmering threads of energy that connected their hearts and minds. Instead of domination, it showed perfect balance, two souls choosing to share their strengths and weaknesses, their fears and hopes. "This isn't control," Elias said, his voice carrying harmonics of Zyria's power. "This is what your people never understood. Love isn't about possession. It's about choice. And we choose each other." Voss pulled the trigger, but the energy bolt dissolved harmlessly against Zyria's psychic barrier. She stepped forward, her presence filling the docking bay with aurora light. "Tell High Command," she said, her voice carrying the authority of a species that had once sung across the stars, "that the last daughter of Veldar has remembered who she was meant to be. And she's going home." The Explorer Starweaver launched into the void with a roar of fusion engines, leaving the station's lights dwindling behind them. In the pilot's seat, Elias set course for the quarantine zone while Zyria reached out with her restored abilities, searching for the psychic signatures that might, just might, mean her people had survived. "Can you feel them?" he asked, watching her face glow with concentration. "Maybe," she whispered, tears streaming down her purple cheeks. "It's faint, but there's something deep in the planet's heart, where the crystal cores used to sing." She opened her eyes, and they blazed with fierce joy. "Elias, I think they're dreaming. Waiting for someone to wake them up." He leaned over to kiss her, tasting salt and starlight and infinite possibility. "Then let's go wake them up." The ship turned toward the quarantine zone, carrying two souls who had found in each other the courage to rewrite the ending history had tried to give them. Behind them, the station's emergency lights flashed their futile warnings into the dark. Ahead lay a broken world, a scattered people, and the kind of love that could resurrect civilizations. The end.